Welcome everybody. We're just giving it a sec to let everybody connect here. All right, we can go ahead and kick things off. So, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar titled 2023 Legislative and Regulatory Wrap-Up and 2024 Update. My name is Neil Leisenring. I'm the Senior Digital Marketing Analyst here at PHCC National. And presenting for you today are Mark Valentini, PHCC's Director of Legislative Affairs, and Chuck White, PHCC's Vice President of Regulatory Affairs. Before we get started, I want to let you know that as an audience member, you are on mute, but we still do want to hear from you. Please type any questions or comments at any time into the Q&A box that's located in the lower part of your Zoom screen. We will get to as many questions as the time allows. You may also use the chat box if you would like to send a message to myself or another attendee. If you need to send a message to another attendee, please be sure to select that specific attendee. Otherwise, your message will be sent out to everyone. All right, so thank you again for joining us this afternoon. I am now going to turn it over to my good friends Chuck and Mark. Whenever you are ready, guys.
All right, great. Thanks, Neil. Hi, everyone. Mark Valentini, Director of Legislative Affairs for PHCC National. Just a brief overview of our agenda today, and then I'll turn it over to Chuck for a quick introduction before we get started. We're just going to do an overview of PHCC's Government Relations Program. We'll touch on some things that are going on in Congress, brief election analysis. We'll talk about some state level issues that we're going to pay attention to in the coming year. We'll turn it over to Chuck for a regulatory update, and then promotion for a legislative conference this year, May 21st and 22nd in Washington, D.C., and then we'll open it up to Q&A. And so with that, I'll turn it over to Chuck for a quick introduction.
Yeah, thank you all for joining us today. I'm Chuck White, I'm the Vice President of Regulatory Affairs for PHCC National. I work remotely from South Bend, Indiana, but happy to work with both Mark and Neil and get some information out to you about the various regulations that are kind of perplexing a number of contractors. A lot of things have been changing and going on, and a few things have changed just recently that maybe have softened the impact of some of that. But back to Mark here so he can give us an update on legislative issues and stare at his crystal ball a little bit.
Sounds good. Thanks, Chuck. Real quick, just a reading of the antitrust statement. This meeting is conducted under the PHCC antitrust policy. Those present are reminded that no association meeting or activity will include any discussion whatsoever of actual prices, costs, or any other terms of competition. With that, we'll go to a quick overview of what PHCC's government relations program is about. Just as a refresher, it's three things mainly, right? Policy and industry advocacy. We, support legislation, regulations that advance industry interests, and oppose anything that's gonna harm us, right? So, we support workforce programs that provide avenues for job seekers to come into the building trades. We're opposed to legislation such as, what we've been seeing at the state level, such as, gas bans and new construction and existing construction. PHCC has been in the forefront of that battle as well. Also education, right? So Congress is made up of 535 elected members, and each one of those members are bombarded every day with information from a variety of industries, from a variety of special interests, and PHCC is part of that competition. And so, part of our job is to make sure that we get our message to the forefront of legislators, making sure they have an understanding of how our industry works, how our association is structured, and then, of course, why the plumbing and HVAC industry is important to the health and safety of the American people. So a lot of that is based on relationships, which is the third prong of our efforts, making sure that we have a good working relationship with members of Congress on key committees, especially those that understand our industry and support us and want to advance our interests. We also do that through not just having relationships with members of Congress, but also with other industry stakeholders, such as in the manufacturing sector, with the code bodies, and other industry stakeholders in construction, and sometimes outside of construction, if our interests are the same. We also are part of coalitions that are issue focused. So PHCC, of course, is a part of coalitions that are focused on gas bans. That are, and those coalitions are state level, and we're also part of a federal level coalition that's managed by American Gas Association. We're part of, Washington Industrial Roundtable, which is a group of business lobbyists, that are focused on small business issues. We're members of the High Performance Building Coalition, and other industry stakeholder groups that promote our interests, or we work with them to promote our interests. And then of course we do what we can to provide support for state legislative activities that are being led by our chapters. And then of course we have a political action committee, which is voluntary contributions that are used to support the reelection campaigns of members of Congress that we support. And then of course our annual legislative conference is sort of the keystone of all of this. So Chuck and I, more so myself, but Chuck as well, deal with policymakers in Washington on a daily basis. But we're not, or at least I'm not a contractor. Chuck used to be a contractor, but they need to talk to, policymakers need to see the actual people that do the work. They need to see the people that we represent, and so our annual legislative conference every year is the opportunity to get contractors in front of policymakers so that you can tell your story directly. So with that, usually our top issues have to do with workforce, energy and environment, small business and tax issues, and licensing. And those are continuous issues. And sometimes you'll have an issue that'll pop up, that we need to shift our attention to. But for the most part, in our day-to-day, we're focused on workforce issues such as, registered apprenticeship, DOL registered apprenticeship programs, Workforce Innovation Opportunities Act grants, Perkins CTE, and also to a certain extent, something new that's come up is also focus on Pell Grants, and I'll touch on that in a little bit. But making sure that there are policies in place that open up as many avenues as possible for job seekers to come into the building trades like plumbing and HVAC, and also making sure that registered apprenticeship is sort of the linchpin of that. There have been proposals in the past that we've pushed back against that would sort of fragment workforce programs and maybe over credentialize. I don't know what a better term for that is, but sort of taking the holistic approach of a registered program and breaking it up into sort of certifications. There was an attempt to do that back in 2019 with a proposed rule from DOL, Industry Recognized Apprenticeship Program, which would essentially, in our reading of the rule, would have allowed pretty much any industry to start an apprenticeship program without the oversight that the registered apprenticeship program has. And it would have credentialized trades like plumbing into sort of certified water heater installer or certified garbage disposal installer. And that's not sort of how the trade works, right? That might work in other industries like IT, but for us, we want, obviously we prefer the holistic approach. Contractors aren't going to hire one-trick ponies, and so we want to make sure that any workforce policies that come out of Congress or come out of Department of Labor, Department of Education sort of reflect that. On the energy side, of course, gas bans has been a big concern for you since at least 2019. And so our position officially is that, look, we're not opposed to building decarbonization. We are opposed to policies that sort of force that, right? We support a diverse energy portfolio, for, as part of our national energy policy, that is that, natural gas needs to be a part of that, right? And, solar should be a part of that, right? And wind, right? But it should, one of those should not be the be all end all. We need multiple sources of energy in order to keep our economy and to keep our country running. Small business and tax issues. Look, we support an environment where our contractors are able to do business without the heavy hand of government. And we want them to operate in an environment that promotes economic growth and job growth. So we're going to support those policies, generally low tax, policies that are, promote lower taxes, lower tax burdens for small businesses, especially. And then on the licensing side, PHCC supports licensing, right? You got to have a licensed plumber, a licensed HVAC contractor doing work. It's about promoting not just professionalism, right? But ensuring that the people, a license is one of the ways that we have to ensure that a person is qualified to do the work. It's not just a matter of, installing a toilet or something like that. For installations of appliances like, water heaters and HVAC systems can have very adverse impacts on the health and safety of homeowners and building occupants. And so we want to make sure that there's a strong licensing regimen in place, whatever that looks like at the state by state level, of course. So anyway, just a quick update on what's going on in the federal government. State of Congress right now, their focus, at least for this month, is going to be on border security in Ukraine and Israel. So right now, the Biden administration has proposed $106 billion in military assistance to Ukraine and Israel. So in return, I think Republicans are pushing back, and they don't want to sign off on anything like that unless it includes some level of border security. So the Senate is trying to hash out the details there. It's been very slow going. And then, of course, the House is focused on spending bills. It looked like there might have been an agreement, but we're still sort of in a holding pattern. Right now, we're under the government is under a continuing resolution. That's a two-part continuing resolution. The first one expires on January 19th. That funds one group of agencies, and then a February 2nd deadline. And that is a separate funding for a separate group of agencies. So if no agreement is reached by January 19th, you're going to have sort of a partial government shutdown. The more critical agencies are the ones that are under the February 2nd deadline. So then that would kind of put Congress under pressure to really come to an agreement, or else by February 2nd, if nothing is done, you'll have a complete shutdown. There seems to be some progress that's being made, and so hopefully we can avoid all of that together. There's no appetite for a shutdown. I don't think there's certainly no appetite in the Republican conference to look for another Speaker of the House, and so I think that's the kind of leverage that Speaker Johnson has, and he's not going to be afraid to use it. On the election side, I mean, it's looking like Trump is going to get the Republican, former President Donald Trump is going to get the Republican nomination. He's certainly polling very well. I know that we're hearing a lot about Nikki Haley sort of, coming up ahead, but even then, I think she's still about 20 points behind the latest polls I've seen in Iowa. And that could change, if you want to compare it to similar around this time back in 2020, you had Bernie Sanders and Pete Buttigieg were ahead of Joe Biden for the Democratic nomination. And in the end, when by the time March came around, Biden was the clear front runner. So, a lot could change between now and the Iowa caucuses, and New Hampshire and South Carolina. So we'll see how it plays out. But for now, Trump's numbers are looking like they're going to be very hard to beat for the Republican nomination. In the Senate, I would say it leans Republican at the moment. West Virginia with Joe Manchin stepping down, I mean, that's a guaranteed Republican pickup. And there's just no other way around that. Other states that are said to be competitive include Nevada and Pennsylvania. I'm not convinced. I think those states still lean D. I think that Casey and Cortez Masto in those states will pull ahead, but who knows what'll happen, right? It's an eternity between now and November. But for now, I'm not seeing anything. They're pretty well positioned, I think. But in states like Ohio and Montana are certainly going to be truly competitive. I wouldn't write off Sherrod Brown, especially John Tester. Tester especially has won in very, very competitive environments. But if the Senate does tip Republican, I think it's Montana and Ohio that's gonna be the catalyst for that. In the House, it's pure toss-up. If you look at the Republicans have won a narrow majority as it is. And so you already had a number of resignations, that have narrowed their majority. You've had some redistricting in North Carolina and Wisconsin that's going to help Republicans, but what's going to hurt them is redistricting in states like Alabama. It's going to give them that looks like it's going to guarantee Democrats one extra seat, and then New York as well. You have about a half dozen moderate Republicans that are going to be in competitive races this year. Folks like Molinaro and Lawler and them, and so. We'll see I mean, it's pure toss up. I don't have a prediction other than, we'll see what happens for the House. So what does that mean for PHCC? People I think are sick of hearing about elections, but it does have an impact, right? Who comes out on top? If you have a government that's controlled by the Republicans, I think they're going to be better for contractors when it comes to tax policy, small business policy, and on energy issues. When you have Democrats in office, I think they're going to be better on workforce issues. They've always been more receptive to maintaining the registered apprenticeship program. They've always been more receptive to increasing funding for job training. And so those, on the workforce side, I think that's where Democrats are going to be better for, at least for PHCC policy agenda. So we'll go sort of a couple of bills that we're watching right now. Some of them are messaging bills. Energy Choice Act, sponsored by Nick Langworthy of New York. Essentially, it's a fuel choice bill at the federal level. It preempts state and local governments from banning gas connections and new construction. And then we also another bill, Hands Off Our Home Appliances Act, which would sort of set more, efficiency standards, better efficiency standards, less stringent efficiency standards for appliances, and prohibits bans on gas appliances. And so there's a similar legislation that Lesko and also Armstrong of North Dakota had sponsored earlier this year that would prevent the Department of Energy and also the Consumer Product Safety Commission from regulating or banning gas stoves. Again, strictly messaging bills. The gas stove bills had passed the House. Hands Off Our Home Appliances Act, not yet. But even if those bills do get to the Senate, they're not going to get it. These are strictly messaging bills for now. If you have a Republican Congress and a Republican president, I can certainly see an opportunity for that language to be put in a piece of must-pass and legislation, particularly a Republican energy bill. I could see these bills being added as amendments, in a Republican Congress. So we also have the Smart Energy Efficiency Standards Act, HR 4378. This is something that has to do with date of installation versus date of manufacture for HVAC, particularly in the Southwest region of the country, where at the moment HVAC equipment has to meet a certain efficiency date by the date of its installation and not by its date of manufacture. Right. And so that creates an issue for a lot of contractors that might keep a stock of equipment where, it was manufactured by a certain date, but it wasn't installed by a certain date. Therefore, the equipment is obsolete. They can't install it, at least in the Southwest region. And so they got to find a way to move it. And so that legislation would address that problem. National Apprenticeship Reauthorization. National Apprenticeship Act was passed in 1937, and it hasn't been reauthorized since. And so you've had a series of regulations that have been passed since then, to implement the Registered Apprentice Program. And so National Apprenticeship Reauthorization would codify all of that, modernize the Registered Apprenticeship Program. PHCC supports that. We also support WIOA reauthorization. WIOA is Workforce Innovation Opportunities Act. Some of our state executives take advantage of this program to help offset the costs of training for their apprentices. And so what that does is you have federal funds. The program is appropriated to the tune of about $2 to $3 billion a year. And so it allows job grants to go to job seekers that are seeking in-demand work. And so obviously we support that. Anything that makes it easier for people to come into the trades. Anything that offsets their costs, PHCC supports that. Jobs Act and Pell Grants expansion. So Jobs Act, what that would do is allow Pell Grants to be used for short-term training programs, 150 to 600 hours. And so we like that because Pell Grants generally are used for 4-year college, right? And so Jobs Act would permit some of that money to be used for job training in high demand fields, in accredited programs. And so that would particularly benefit HVAC training. Also look out for EPCA reform. That's Energy and Energy Conservation Act reform. So EPCA was a law that was passed in 1974, 1975. And so we're looking at, how that's going to reform. It's going to could have an impact on the kinds of appliances that a lot of contractors install. And then, of course, the extension of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, which is the tax bill that was passed at the end of 2017 during the Trump administration. We're looking at an extension of the estate tax and also Section 199A for pass-through deductions for small businesses. Energy policy, talking about fuel choice versus gas bans at the state level. States that we're looking at for this kind of thing going to be Nebraska, South Carolina, North Dakota, sort of the low-hanging fruit. Those are going to be legislatures and governors that are going to be friendly to passing a fuel choice bill. Virginia and Pennsylvania, not so much. Virginia has a Democratic legislature, and so they're not going to be, supportive of a fuel choice legislation. Pennsylvania, there might be a chance there. The legislature had passed by a pretty strong bipartisan majority, prior to Governor Cohen taking the governor's mansion. That they passed a fuel choice bill, but it was vetoed. And so the new governor of Pennsylvania might be open to it. We'll see if the legislature passes that this year. And then, of course, particularly New England, California, Washington State, Colorado, New York, and Illinois are going to be areas where you're going to see attempts, if they're not already underway, to phase out the use of gas appliances and gas connections in new construction. I know that the Ninth Circuit just recently ruled to uphold the lower court decision of California Restaurant Association versus City of Berkeley. So that ruling is going to apply to the Ninth District. I don't know how that impacts California, particularly in their effort to sort of decarbonize the built environment. And so, whether or not that gets appealed to the Supreme Court, or whether lawsuits that are currently ongoing in New York and New York City are going to be the catalyst for sort of a broader decision. So we'll see what happens there. Licensing, of course, attempts to water down licensing for trades like electricians and plumbers and HVAC contractors is far more common I've seen than attempts to sort of reinforce it or establish a new regimen. One of the sort of compromises that I've seen at the state level is reciprocity, right? Where rather than just watering down licensing, a state would, such as Arkansas and South Dakota last year, passed bills that would allow licensing reciprocity for states that have a licensing regime that is equally as stringent as what Arkansas or South Dakota has, right? And then on top of that, the licensing board for the particular trade would still have the final say. Our members can be a little ambivalent about that, but for now, it seems like it's not as bad as it might seem. So we still want to pay attention to that and see what happens in other states. So I'm going to stop there. I'm going to turn it over to Chuck to give the regulatory update.
Thank you, Mark. Certainly a lot going on your plate at the moment. It seems like there's plenty going on in the regulatory world as well. The legislative world creates laws, the regulatory world decides how to implement them, and that's really the big impact to the contractor. The regulatory world has been extremely active in the past year to 2 years. We're not really seeing much change in that, not predicting much change in that in 2024. I'm going to talk a little about the Department of Energy and pushing their increased efficiency levels. Department of Labor has lots of things going on, really a lot of them supporting worker opportunity and worker rights. EPA, lots going on in the refrigerant world. Talk about that a little bit. And also the Treasury, the Inflation Reduction Act has buckets of money out there for work that's coming. It's the money is not out and rolling yet, but there are some tax credits that are currently underway. So if we pop on to the next slide. Over at the Department of Energy, they've had a bunch of proposed rules, particularly proposed rules on residential water heaters and residential boilers. Those rules are not published as final rules yet. They took comments on their proposal, which PHCC filed comments, kind of telling them what we think of their view of the world. They'd like residential gas boilers to be 95% efficiency. We think there are problems with that in the venting situations. The gas water heater rule, residential water heaters, probably a little less offensive than the boiler rule, but still has some problems as we see it. The gas storage tank water heaters would not go to a condensing level, but tankless water heaters, gas tankless water heaters would go to condensing only. They would be 95, 96% units. There is some turmoil out there in the industry among some of the manufacturers about that, not a complete consensus on that part of the rule. Residential electric storage heaters would move to a heat pump type product. The efficiency level would be set such that only a heat pump could meet that. They would allow an exception for small electric heaters, 36 inches and shorter, so that you have installations in tight closets or under cabinets, under counters in kitchens. Those would still be available, but really at a limited recovery rate. We think there's some problems with that as well. So we filed comments on this rule, on both of those rules. They are not out as a final rule. We expect there will be some industry litigation on some parts of this, but that can't happen until they're actually published as final rules. On the other hand, on the next slide, the commercial water heater rule and the residential gas furnace rule both have been published as final rules. Commercial water heater was several months ago. Residential gas furnace was mid-December. A lot of this activity has been waiting, pending the residential gas furnace rule to come out. We filed comments on both of these as well. In those rules, residential gas furnaces would go to a 95% efficiency level. We would no longer have non-condensing products. PHCC has been on record for quite some time in opposition to that, that the venting issues would be problematic for a number of installations, particularly low-income folks who couldn't necessarily afford the higher price furnace or the changes to the venting system, that this could be a significant issue. Commercial gas tankless water heaters, storage tank heaters would go to 95% under their rule. The tankless heaters would go to 96%. We don't think that is necessarily as bad as the residential gas furnace rule, but still will result in some problem installations where the venting problems, installation problems could really raise the installation costs and perhaps move some folks over towards the electric water heater market instead of gas. By the rule, the commercial electric storage water heaters would remain unchanged. They do not, as it stands right now, there are no commercial heat pump water heaters on the market, at least of any significant size. So the department at this time is not moving electric storage heaters to the heat pump level. They could do that in a future rulemaking. We kind of expect to see some information about that, maybe the end of 2024 or early into 2025. A lot of this information relies on what's called the interpretive rule. We went back and forth with the department about the venting for condensing products and the venting for non-condensing products, and that venting was a feature for consumers. They would not have to reroute vents through their building. If you had non-condensing products, you would still be able to use the existing vent system, whether that's a masonry chimney or a B vent or whatever that might be. During the Trump administration, the department agreed with that assessment that venting was a feature for consumers. But when the Biden administration took over, they issued this interpretive rule, and their take is venting is not a feature for consumer. The features of these devices for consumers is really that they heat things. It doesn't really matter how you do it. And so for that, they have decided going to condensing products does not impact the features available for consumers. We filed comments on all of these things, really don't support the particular application of condensing products. Again, we think that there are going to be some impacted consumers out there that this will be problematic. The next slide, however, goes forward to the gas industry has challenged the Department of Energy on these three rules: the commercial water heater, residential gas furnace, and the interpreter rule as well. Some of those challenges were filed last year, particularly interpretive rule and commercial water heaters, and the courts held them in abeyance until the gas furnace rule came out, so that those three could be kind of bundled together and addressed as one unit, not have to sue each particular rule individually. American Gas Association, that's AGA, the American Public Gas Association, APGA, the National Propane Gas Association, NPGA, and Thermal Products LLC filed suit in the DC Circuit Court of Appeals on these rules. There's very little argumentative information available at the moment. Those briefings are being prepared to be filed, but there is litigation filed on these three rules. Again, these rules were previously held pending whatever was going to happen with litigation. The three lawsuits have indeed been combined. It's going to take months, maybe years, to sort this out. One of the things about the rule making out of Department of Energy for these products, at least, it's not an immediate implementation. So if those rules had been published and gone into effect, those product changes would not occur until about 5 years in the future. For some products, it's 3 years, but these products particularly are a 5-year window. So even if the rule had happened December 31 of 23, it would be 5 years from then in 2029 before the actual product would have to change. So there's time for the litigation to work its way through the courts. Probably will end up being appealed either way. However it's decided, it will be further appealed. Whether it actually manages to get to the Supreme Court and is heard, yet to be seen. But the gas industry has challenged all of those rules, so we have yet to see how that change is gonna shake out. I will say the gas furnace rule has been litigated on and off since 2012, so does not surprise me to see a lot of discussion about this. Moving forward here, next slide. Over on the Department of Labor side, there's a couple things over there. The Department of Labor has just issued its independent contractor rule. This one has been a little bit of a political football as well. In the Trump administration, they changed the regulations to make it a little give more latitude to who is an independent contractor versus being an employee. This rule reverses that, reverts to pre-Trump regulations. There's always been a multi-factor analysis used by the courts that has these 6 factors: the opportunity for profit or loss, your financial stake and your resources the worker has to have, permanence of your work relationship, your control over the employer has over the person's work. Is the work essential to that person's business, and the skill and initiative required by the worker for that to happen. In the Trump administration, they narrowed those focuses. The current rule reverts back and gives really equal weight to all of those factors in determining whether someone is an independent contractor. Probably does not have a large impact to our members, really targets more of the gig economy, but there are places out there where people hire on short term for specific tasks, and it becomes a question, are they really your employees, or are you hiring independent contractors? It will be beneficial for our members when they are using independent contractors to get certificates, insurance, and other documents that prove they are indeed independent contractors, so that they you don't end up being held later to be responsible for those people as your employees. Next slide. DOL has also proposed a registered apprentice rule. It supports the concept of registered apprenticeship. Mark has talked about wanting to have the National Apprenticeship Act reauthorized. This obviously does not reauthorize it, but it does support it, adds more language, hopes to streamline the ability to start programs and make the paperwork a little smoother. It also creates and supports what's called a career and technical education registered apprentice program. Those programs are really focused towards vocational schools and community colleges, not necessarily in the construction industry, but there's this vision out there that God and everybody needs an apprentice program. And so the non-traditional industries, places that have not in the past had apprenticeships, they're talking about teachers apprenticeships and bank employee apprenticeships, lots of different apprenticeships out there, different than how our traditional plumbing or HVAC apprenticeship, really any construction apprenticeship, kind of different concepts of that, but it could empower a lot of these vocational schools and community colleges and even regular universities to give them a step into the apprenticeship world. Interesting to see how that works out. We are looking through the rule and trying to think through the implications before we actually file comments, but we will give Department of Labor comments on this rule and kind of how we think it's going to play out for our industry. Next slide moves over to the Environmental Protection Agency. A lot going on there. I would hope folks are aware that there's a refrigerant transition's been going on now for a couple of years, that we're moving away from HFC refrigerants. And whenever I talk about that in my brain, I instantly think of R410A, the most common refrigerant now in residential air conditioning, split system air conditioners. But there are other HFC refrigerants caught in that bucket. I think for most of our members, thinking in terms of 410 is probably the easiest. As of January 1 of this year, we passed a milestone. We had been operating under a 10% reduction of certain HFCs for manufacturing and distribution. That added an additional 30%. So we are now at a 40% reduction of what the manufacturers are able to manufacture or import or put into distribution. That is all part of transitioning to low global warming potential. GWP stands for global warming potential refrigerants. We are expecting the availability of common HFCs to really decline as we move into 2024. Probably there is a reasonable amount of supply here at the beginning of January, a lot of stock out there, but they are only going to be able to manufacture 60% of what they used to make compared to their baseline. That has to show up in the distribution channel as we progress into 2024. So I've talked on previous webinars about planning for your supplies and figuring out how you're going to address this. Members need to be working with their vendors, whoever they've been traditionally working with for refrigerant supplies, need to be working with them, planning this and figuring out how you're going to provide stock for your service and your refrigeration work moving forward in 2024 and 2025. Moving forward, it's going to decrease again in another 6-7 years. we need to be starting to plan and figure out how we're going to do that. The demand is going to increase for recovered refrigerants because we can't manufacture new. Recovered, reclaimed refrigerant is going to be an ever more important factor in the distribution chain. There has been a lack of HFC refrigerants in that recovery chain, market chain. We need to see more of that. The value of recovered refrigerants has gone up. So this could be an additional revenue stream for our members, and there are reclaim organizations that are out marketing that they find value in it and they are willing to pay for it. Again, our members, and if people are big into the HVAC and refrigeration world, they should be looking into what those options are and what kind of value they could derive from this, and certainly be doing more to recover refrigerant and getting it into the reclamation channel. So the next slide. Again, carrying on with the refrigerant transition, PHCC, Hardy, and ACA sued the EPA, and we actually prevailed to eliminate their rule. They wanted to get rid of disposable cylinders. All refrigerant cylinders would be refillable, and that they would create a tracking program, basically tracking every cylinder and pound of refrigerant cradle to grave. That lawsuit was successful, prevailed. EPA had to go back to the drawing board, but it's back. In the latest EPA proposed rule, they still want cylinder tracking. So my little barcode or QR code here, they want to have codes on cylinders, and that manufacturers would scan the cylinder when they send it out into the distribution channel, and wholesalers would scan when they receive it, and contractors would scan when they receive it. And then when you take it back, you scan back that you're returning it. We have a lot of problem with the overall plan and thought to do this tracking, that it's going to create really a data nightmare and hard to enforce. Concerned about where the data is going to be published, what is going to be publicly available as far as controlling our confidential client information and business information. Working hard with EPA to try and understand this and make them understand the needs of our businesses. EPA also wants empty cylinders returned to certified reclaimers so that any remaining refrigerant gets recovered. So you don't have to have a refillable cylinder. You can have a disposable cylinder, but you can't dispose of it in the trash can or at the steel recycler. You would still have to take it back to someone so they could make sure there was no refrigerant left in it. We think this is a fairly onerous requirement, and ignores the fact that many contractors actually do recover the refrigerant out of those cylinders. It's brand new virgin refrigerant. If you put it in a clean cylinder, it's available for you to use on job sites. Way to get that few extra dollars out of every job. Again, we strongly oppose those operations, and are in negotiations or in conversations with EPA about those particular things. So on to our next slide. At the end of this year, at the beginning of January, beginning of 2025, EPA has proposed that air conditioning and heat pump products would all meet less than a 700 global warming potential, less than 700 GWP. The common HFCs, again, think 410A and some others, they can't make that number. Those products will not be suitable to be installed. So as the rule is written, field assembled products must be installed. If they are over the 700 GWP, they must be installed prior to January 1 of 2025. It is not, was no sell-through proposed with this. Products greater than 700 GWP, though, can still be manufactured and used as components if that component's the only thing changed. So if I change an outdoor unit, I can change the outdoor unit. I just can't change the outdoor unit and the indoor unit because then I'm creating a system. Very complicated, very confusing, and it has led to a lot of confusion really on the part of EPA to understand how our products are installed, how our businesses work, that kind of thing. We did get a Christmas present on the 26th of December. EPA did decide they were going to allow a 1-year sell-through for split systems for equipment manufactured prior to 1/1 of 25. So if you have we were really concerned about stranded inventory. If you had product and equipment in your warehouse, or a wholesaler had that equipment after 1/1 of 25, it would only be acceptable as components. You could not be out installing it as installed systems. If you had a big apartment complex you were in the middle of, half the equipment's installed, half the equipment's in a job trailer. After 1/1, you would not be able to install it. It would have been illegal. The department has relented and they see the error of their way, or maybe a little error of their way, and has come through and allowed that there will be a 1-year sell-through for that product, but the product must have a date prior to 1/1 of 25. You can't take newer equipment made after that and install it as a system. You can use it as components, but not a system. I'm sure that's confusing, but for the contractors that were aware of this issue, this is really, really good news and really is in effect a Christmas present. So my next slide skips over and we start talking about the Treasury. There are IRA related Section 25C tax credits. The IRA is the Inflation Reduction Act, not your individual retirement account. So in the IRA, it increased the 25C tax credits for certain products that previously were 10%. They went to 30% of installed costs, again, for these certain products. Heat pumps and heat pump water heaters were really the big winners in that boost. You could get up to $2,000 back on 30, that again is 30% of the installed cost, but up to $2,000 back on a heat pump system or a heat pump water heater system. In 2023, that was a pretty simple thing. You just make the claim that you installed it, provide some rudimentary information on the product, and you would get your tax credit. Moving forward, 2024 and later, Treasury's been trying to figure a better way, more accountability for these products, that people just say, yeah, I did buy that 95% furnace, give me the money, or I did buy this heat pump, claim the money. They are concerned about, especially since the increase that from 10% to 30%, that there is more incentive for fraud and to cheat on the system. So they're wanting to create a unique product identifier, something other than a manufacturer serial number, which those of us talking to the Treasury about this are somehow scratching our head, but they want to create a unique identifier to eliminate fraud. We are in conversations and providing comments to Treasury. They would really like to get guidance out on this pretty soon so that we don't get far into 2024 and not have not have people being told you have to have a number that was not issued, but before you sold the product. So we're thinking this is going to be a fairly prompt thing out of the department. We are, again, we'll let you know how that progresses. But 25C tax credits are really the big thing that is easily available for consumers. If you sold complying products, you can go back with your clients and make sure they're aware that there's money available for them. So I think that completes. Do I have another slide, Mark?
Nope,
No?
that's it.
Off we go. Thank you. Again, if you have questions, put them in the chat. We're happy to answer as best we can.
Thank you, Chuck. Just want to conclude the presentation with a reminder about our legislative conference for 2024. This year, it's going to be Tuesday and Wednesday, May 21st and 22nd. We'll be at the Yotel Washington again this year. For those of you that haven't been since 2019, we have a different conference. There's going to be more educational content. There's going to be more networking opportunities. We're going to have manufacturer reps and distributors in town the same week, and we're going to integrate our contractor members with them. We're going to have sessions to prepare everyone for their meetings on Capitol Hill, including more personalized sessions with smaller groups for those who might be there for the first time, or those pros that just want to, take a refresher. We're going to have panel discussions on key items to help everyone prepare, such as, an issues briefing. And we're also going to have some top industry lobbyists talking about implementation of the Inflation Reduction Act. We're also going to have another group of lobbyists talking about advocacy best practices, which is a session that went really well last year. So we're going to bring that back. Our keynote speakers this year are going to be former Congressman Martin Frost of Texas and Tom Davis of Virginia. We need everyone to come. This is the one opportunity where you can connect with policymakers, so that they can hear directly from you. And it's important for PHCC. If you're a state rep on the call, or if you're a state or local exec on the call, highly encourage you to get your members to attend. I know that sometimes it's hard for some folks to make it because of finances or anything like that. So give me a call, and let's work out something so that we can get you to come to DC, whatever it takes. So, May 21st and 22nd in Washington, DC, it's coming up very quickly. Registration's probably going to open about first week of February. So keep an eye out for that as well. With that,
if you haven't been in a long time, can't really overemphasize that we are very near the Capitol. It's walking distance to the Capitol. We're no longer out where it's a bus ride away. You're in the heart of things. So, some spare time to go tour the monuments or see Washington, D.C. We've had a number of people bring grandchildren or high school students to see DC. It's a really good opportunity to come see, and you'll be right in the heart of things.
So we'll hope to see everyone there. We also have been using a mobile app that will give you all of your meetings with all room assignments and the other members of PHCC that are going to be in that meeting with you. Also includes talking points. So we're leveraging technology to make that process as easy as possible for you. Again, be sure to register when it opens, and if you have any questions, if you need help, give me a call. We'll work something out so that we can get you to come out to DC. With that, we'll adjourn. This is our contact information. We need to hear from you. All right. And if you have any questions, you can ask us now. If something occurs to you later, shoot us an email. Chuck and I cannot do our jobs if we're not getting input from PHCC contractor members and from our state execs. So, please don't be shy. I know you're not. Give us a call, shoot us an email, so that we know what you're thinking, and so that we can calibrate our advocacy efforts accordingly. So that is the end of our presentation. So Neil, I'll turn it back to you. I saw that we have some questions and comments in the chat. So why don't we address those?
Yeah, you want to just give it a beat to see if any questions come in at the end here?
Oh yeah, sure. So first question, could I get this presentation emailed to me? So yes, this presentation has been recorded and it will be available to everyone that is registered. I'm not usually we put that out within a week or so everyone will get this presentation emailed to them. Then that's it. That's everything we got in the chat. If anyone else has any other questions, Neil, I'll turn it back to you to see if anything comes up.
Yeah, no, it looks like that's it. So just thank you to everybody again for joining us this afternoon, and thanks Mark and Chuck for the presentation.
All right.
Thank you all.
Thanks everyone.
All right, take care, everybody.
Bye-bye.